Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sid, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the small version of SeaWorld, SeaQuest. SeaQuest is an interactive aquarium that is usually located in a mall, and currently 8 malls in America are housing a SeaQuest location. In size, their locations are much smaller than SeaWorld, but in the number of animals suffering there is much higher. And before I go any further, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the former staff members of SeaQuest that have helped me out with this video. They have provided a lot of footage, photos, and information. So that was a really big help to help me piece together this video. SeaQuest first opened its doors in 2016 by Vince Cavino. There are touch tanks, reptiles, birds, lots of fish. Some locations have otters, capybara, and sloths. You can also pay extra to get some more hands-on experience with the animals. On their website, they say they act as an exotic pet rescue for animals like parakeets and iguanas. It's interesting that they specifically said those two animals because the bird and the iguana situation is pretty bad at SeaQuest. One time, animal control found they had too many birds in their walk-in aviary, so they told them to cease and desist until they reduced the number of birds.
Get this, SeaQuest transferred the birds to a teenage employee who put them in his dad's garage. This Facebook advertisement shows cages full of parakeets offered to anyone who can provide a good home. It was posted by Joe Rice, former state rep and mayor of Glendale. His high school-aged son works at SeaQuest Littleton. Fox 31 problem solvers captured video of that underaged SeaQuest employee here in the green shorts. He was setting up repeated exchanges in a hardware store parking lot this week, giving away cages and parakeets.
With the iguanas, there were mite outbreaks, countless injuries. The behind-the-scenes area where sick or injured animals were kept were pretty atrocious. It's interesting that they also call themselves a rehabilitation and rescue center when some of their own animals need rescuing and rehabilitation. SeaQuest will often transfer their animals between each different location, and they will also send some of them to the Austin Aquarium, which is owned by Vince's sister-in-law. One time, the Austin Aquarium had too many lizards, so they decided to just set a bunch of them free inside and outside the aquarium.
They're starving to death. There's nothing in there for them to eat.
So you don't want outside of these little?
We used to just let them out.
Why?
Because Salmon thought we had too many.
Yeah, we released like 600.
So we
Into
just
the building.
let them go.
Yeah, it was fun. Putting them on us
And we were just releasing them outside. We were
Yeah.
like, goodbye, be free.
Oh.
So any rescues SeaQuest may get either suffer there, get moved elsewhere to suffer, or get released into the wild or given away for free, which is actually probably the best case scenario. Now I just want to take a brief moment to thank today's sponsor, MantaSleep. While today's video topic isn't something you should sleep on, sleeping is still very important. MantaSleep makes the world's best sleep masks and functional sleep accessories, with the goal of helping to improve and optimize sleep so you have the energy to create your best life. Whether it be an afternoon nap or a deep sleep, they offer a variety of sleep masks that will help you regain your energy, focus, clarity, and strength through sleep. There are masks with either a near blackout or a 100% blackout, which help you achieve a deep sleep. The eye cups are attached with Velcro, which makes them completely adjustable and customizable. At first, I was not sure if I would even be able to fall asleep with something attached to my face, but they are seriously comfortable. It just feels like another pillow on your face. It's important to put you and your health first, so instead of drinking a coffee to get through the afternoon, have a nap instead to regain some of that energy. You can do that and unlock your full potential with one of MantaSleep's sleep masks. Check out MantaSleep by clicking the link at the top of my description box, and don't forget to use code Dwyer to get 10% off your order. Okay, so now back to SeaQuest, and firstly I want to talk about the problem with interactive aquariums, because that is a big reason why animals suffer at SeaQuest. Vince, the owner, originally started SeaQuest because at other places he wasn't able to touch the animals.
After going to lots of zoos and aquariums with my family and realizing that I couldn't touch stuff and get in the exhibit, I wanted to get in the exhibit with the animals. That's when I decided I'm gonna open my own.
But making these animals as accessible as possible to humans essentially ruins their life. SeaQuest has many crowded tanks where people can stick their hands in and touch the fish or rays. Wild stingrays are usually solitary, shy, avoid each other, breed once a year and are rarely aggressive to one another, and dwell on the ocean floor. They are also considered to be intelligent. Studies have shown that stingrays know to squirt water into a tube full of food to push the food out on their first go. But at SeaQuest, their cognitive abilities are not put to use and they are robbed of any kind of natural setting. In order to receive food, they have to fight for space at the surface of the water. Rays have also been seen dead or struggling to breathe at SeaQuest. Vince claims that an aquarium setting is better for fish.
I would say animals do better in an aquarium because you have a perfectly controlled environment.
But that is far from the truth. SeaQuest is the furthest thing from a controlled environment, especially when you have hundreds if not thousands of guests reaching into the tanks every day. The body of every fish and ray is covered by a layer of mucus known as a slime coat. A fish's slime coat keeps out disease and parasites, but when a human compromises a fish's slime coat, it is susceptible to those things. There are so many risks to touching and feeding these animals. It is far from the controlled environment Vince thinks it is. And if the animals enjoyed being in these situations, they wouldn't try to escape as much as they do.
She did escape out of her enclosure again today.
Oh. Oh.
And the doors are wide.
No turning back now.
A capybara badly hurt after escaping from an improper transport.
And an escaped lizard wandering the concrete floor with a stampede of excited customers threatening its safety.
Didn't you just jump out?
Yeah.
You guys got to watch it?
Yeah, it was really...
We might need to add another barrier because she got out anyway.
Some locations also have flying squirrels, where people can pay extra to get an interactive experience with them. But flying squirrels are nocturnal, and these hands-on experiences happen during the day when they should be sleeping. And according to staff members, the squirrel experience was often overbooked, putting strain on the staff members and heavily disrupting the squirrel's sleeping schedule. A USDA report reveals that one of the squirrels did attempt to make it to freedom, but one of the staff members unfortunately inadvertently closed the door on the squirrel, crushing it. And that is not the only incident involving crushed animals. Because people were allowed to completely walk in and around the birdcage, people have stepped on birds before.
And oftentimes, because they let people walk around, the kids would stomp on the birds and kill them. And then they would throw the birds in the garbage so they didn't have to record it or show that the birds were dead.
And something similar also happened to turtles.
They had smaller turtles that were given to kids essentially to handle. I think they started with 12. By the time I left, they had 3. I know some were actually crushed by kids.
And Vince claims that the animals embrace this kind of lifestyle.
Well, our experience is if you go there and you see the thousands and thousands of visitors that we've had having a great experience, these animals are interacting. So I can't speak to what this person's experience other than to say that what we see on a daily basis is thousands of people having an amazing time and the animals embracing it, eating out of their hands, coming up close. They're not avoiding the guests by any means. If you go there, you'll see it. They're not avoiding you. They're coming up to you. The stingrays, a lot of people say, boy, they're just like puppy dogs. And we see that with all the animals.
But that just isn't true. They are forced to embrace this lifestyle. Video group chats between staff members reveal that animals were deliberately starved so that they would be more inclined to take food from guests.
Bram, I'm a reminder, with these chickens, we don't feed them in the morning. So we don't put food out for these guys in the morning. They get, fed by the guests in the morning. unless we find any, issues with that. That's the plan and what we'll do. So no more food out here on this turf in the morning. Also, we've got a feeder out for the rabbits here in Giant Flemish Rabbits, but they've got a food dish right there. You're never, ever going to take food from a guest's hands if they've got a food dish just sitting right in there for them. So let's get that fixed and let's not see that again. We can do different supplemental things for these rabbits, but we want to make sure that the food is coming from the guests.
And because animals became dependent on the guests for food, they became very food aggressive and would sometimes injure the guests.
Coatis have bitten kids. I've seen 2 to 3 that have actually broken skin. We've had cappies chewing holes through clothes. And the lorikeets would get super food aggressive and go and bite ears and necks, and sometimes they broke skin.
This is also very apparent with the iguanas.
Oh, they're waiting for food. That's a big one right there.
Unlike other animal cages, it was completely free for people to enter the iguana cage, which made it a big hotspot for people to go to. And there were heaps of incidents where iguanas would bite the guests. A boy even had to get stitches when an iguana latched onto his arm. Dozens of people have been bitten by other animals as well. From June 2018 to January 2019, over 30 injuries were reported at the Colorado location. A guest was bitten by a bamboo shark when it came up to get food. Another one was bitten by a pufferfish, and when she was bitten, she flung her hand back, which pulled the pufferfish out of the water, but she was able to catch it with her hands and put it back in the water. She later called 911 with difficulties breathing and numbness. A pig also bit a 3-year-old's leg and broke skin. A venomous lizard bit a man's finger and tore it up pretty bad. From 2019 to 2021, the location in Utah also had a number of similar incidents. The USDA actually issued them with a $4,500 fine because animals were biting guests and staff members. And staff members getting injured at SeaQuest locations was actually far more common than guests getting injured. While a number of the managers at SeaQuest are a part of the problem, many of the staff members have also fallen victim to it. The first red flag that staff receive when they get a job there is that they are required to sign an NDA. And of course that's not an issue for people who want to work there because they love animals. But once they start working there, it is very apparent why they were required to sign an NDA. They are exposed to a whole bunch of awful stuff. For starters, they had to work in a roach-infested environment. When staff brought up the need for an exterminator, their requests were ignored. On top of that, they also had to deal with black mold outbreaks.
All this black stuff is mold.
I also just found this. I'm not sure what it is. And there's white stuff growing all over the street.
You find black mold, just throw it away.
Staff were also expected to do things they weren't trained in doing, like building cages.
This former SeaQuest employee we spoke to several months ago told us in some cases, employees with no experience building anything were forced to build the enclosures.
We weren't licensed to do that. They would order these animals and be like, all right, you got 3 days.
Another training issue was that only specific people were able to put fish back in their fish tank if they jumped out of the tank. Not just any staff member could return the fish to the water. And I feel like that is something that every staff member should be trained to do. But one staff member almost let a fish suffocate on the floor because they weren't trained to pick it back up and put it in the water. And most of the staff members wanted to work at SeaQuest because they loved animals. So it was not easy for them to be surrounded by neglect, injuries, and unsuitable conditions. They had to witness overcrowded territorial reptiles that would injure each other while management insisted they stay together. Staff had to wait around until they were given permission to take turtles with extreme shell rot to the ER vet, permission that never came. Due to staff shortages and lack of concern from management, guinea pigs were kept in unsuitable conditions, resulting in them getting bumblefoot. They also weren't getting their dietary needs met, which is a result of relying on guests to feed the animals. Due to the lack of fiber, one of them developed a severe impaction and also had a prolapsed penis. And because he wasn't able to digest food properly, he became emaciated. Staff members who would try and massage the blockage out of the guinea pig would be criticized by management for eating up time. And when the guinea pigs were taken into the back area to recover, their conditions weren't much better. One of the guinea pigs responded to these inadequate living quarters by having a seizure.
It's kind of an emergency. I don't know if I should show it on here, but I think we're going to show it anyway. This guinea pig is kind of having a seizure right now.
Most of the staff did the best they could, but with limited resources, overbooked interactive experiences, countless other issues, and little concern from management or Vince, some of them just had to remove themselves from the situation and try and get SeaQuest shut down. In April 2017, multiple former staff members spoke out against SeaQuest. They worked at SeaQuest's second location in Las Vegas, which opened in December 2016. They saw hundreds of animals die and many instances of neglect and mistreatment. So when SeaQuest wanted to set up a new location in Florida, because of what the staff members had shared, there was pushback from the public. PETA also got involved and found a little bit of a legal loophole and filed a lawsuit against them. While that SeaQuest location was under construction, they found that the city unlawfully issued SeaQuest with a development permit under the pretense that SeaQuest was going to be a museum, not an aquarium, and aquariums weren't allowed under city zoning laws. SeaQuest was then ultimately evicted, and they ended up owing contractors over $240,000. But it wasn't that easy to block the construction of other locations, because more and more aquariums continued to open, and more mistreatment continued to happen. At the Colorado location, a manager was fined with animal cruelty for letting a sloth burn its face twice on a heat lamp. Basically, a two-toed sloth named Flash sustained burns to his face on 2 separate occasions when Ashley Belfiore was the manager, and in both cases she failed to notify a veterinarian. Court documents reveal that the burns caused swelling of the sloth's entire face and that the wounds were scabbing and oozing with pus. She was then charged with animal cruelty. She declined a deal from the prosecutor, and then the case went to a jury where she did end up winning. But that was just one of many incidents that particular location had. To begin with, SeaQuest unlawfully imported 3 mammals into Colorado without permits. One of those animals was a sloth. Animal control found those animals not on display at the aquarium, but in one of the manager's basements. There were 2 capybaras and 1 sloth.
Take a look at these pictures from that citation report. On the left is one of the 2 capybaras. On the right is a 2-toed sloth. The photos were taken by wildlife investigators inside the basement of a SeaQuest manager's home in Golden. Neither species had permits to be imported or possessed. Then, according to Parks and Wildlife, despite still not having authorization to be displayed or transported, the creatures ended up at the Southwest Plaza Mall on display.
SeaQuest and the manager paid a total of $277 in fines for that incident. They were then hit with a cease and desist, which ordered them to stop operating as a pet animal sanctuary and a retail aquarium facility without possessing a valid license to perform such acts. In the cease and desist letter, they were told if they were going to even consider granting them any kind of license, that they would have to lower the amount of birds that were crammed into one cage. So SeaQuest did lower the amount of birds and made some other amendments, and they were eventually granted a license. But that only lasted 6 months. While they were operating, they failed to report the death of a bird who drowned in its water bowl, and they failed to report any injuries that people or animals sustained. Colorado Parks and Wildlife held a hearing for SeaQuest and decided to suspend their license for 2 years for numerous violation episodes and failed to adhere to several of the conditions of their state license. The suspension applied to species regulated by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, so that meant Flash the sloth, the otters, the capybara, a kookaburra, some fish, and 3 types of snake could no longer be housed there, and they all ended up being transferred to other SeaQuest facilities. Flash spent some time at the Minnesota location, where on July 1st, 2019, he bit a guest during an encounter. Sloths have sharp, fang-like teeth, so when they bite, they have the potential to do some serious damage. And as a result of the bite, the Minnesota Department of Health quarantined Flash for 30 days over rabies transmission concerns. Then after that, he was transferred to the Las Vegas SeaQuest, where he died in July 2020. He had a history of weakness, twitching, a lack of appetite, but there was no specific reason as to why he died. A few months later, they replaced Flash with another sloth, also named Flash. He developed similar issues to the previous Flash and died 5 months later.
No more sloths at SeaQuest. Clark County Animal Control is taking action after 2 sloths died, the deaths happening within a 9-month period.
Animal Control said that because that was the second sloth that died there, they would not be granting them permission to get another sloth. And much like the Colorado location, the New Jersey location also has a pretty bad track record with sloths. An almost identical situation happened where a sloth also named Flash died and was promptly replaced by another sloth named Flash, and management told staff to tell the guests that they were the same sloth. Also, all of these sloths were only a couple of years old when they typically live up to 30 years. But in early 2023, they got a sloth a lot younger than 2 years. It was a 4-month-old baby sloth named Rosie. At that age, she was being fed solid food and being wrapped in a blanket and shown to guests. She should have still been with her mother for the first 6 to 12 months of her life, drinking milk. So she was pretty much being starved, and after a month of being at SeaQuest, she died. According to text messages from staff members, when a vet did arrive to check up on Rosie, the vet said that she was flat like a pancake, really tired and lethargic. According to staff members, after Rosie died, management told them to act as if she was never there. But the new adult sloth at the New Jersey location still doesn't get it easy either. He used the cover of the heat lamp as a way to climb, and he burnt his paw pads on it. The USDA also cited the SeaQuest location in California for failing to provide the correct temperatures and humidity levels in the sloth enclosures. The humidity in the sloths' cages ranged from 46% to 55%. The sloths require 60% to 80% humidity. Incorrect humidity can lead to multiple health issues, the main one being a disruption of the sloth's digestion, which can lead to them starving to death. And this is an animal they list as threatened on their website. The only threatened SeaQuest knows is how to threaten their lives. The sooner each state bans them from possessing these animals, the better. Another animal they should be banned from having are otters. Vince may seem to care about the otters at SeaQuest.
When these families realize that these otters are vulnerable, that their habitats are being crushed, they're being decimated through deforestation, they now have this vested interest, this heightened awareness of what's going on in their world. And it changes the way they look at the planet. It changes the way that they approach animals and conservation.
But there is a host of evidence that contradicts that. At SeaQuest Las Vegas in 2018, a female otter died due to the stress of shipping, caging during construction, and introduction to a new environment, which may have caused fatal cardiac consequences. And that was according to a necropsy report. And then another otter died in August 2018. We didn't find out that an otter died until a former staff member told the news about it. And since they quickly replaced the dead otter with a new otter, management told staff to tell guests that it was the same otter.
Came up to me and they said that the otter had gone into the tube and I guess it got shredded and that it died. And they just replaced it and they're like, oh no, that's the same otter, you know, because you guys don't know any better.
Jelly is one of 2 female otters that died at SeaQuest in 2018.
But what exactly happened wasn't confirmed until the manager told an arbiter what happened.
Okay, what happened to the second otter that you received a permit for in May?
The second otter passed away. She got caught in one of our filtration systems. The otters were able to open them up and got one of her arms caught in the filtration system.
And when did that occur?
We asked SeaQuest if that otter drowned or, as employees allege, she was butchered by a fan in the filtration system. SeaQuest did not respond to our questions.
And the female otter they replaced the dead otter with was a 2-year-old named Hazelnut, and she actually wasn't permitted to be there to begin with. The permit they were originally issued with only applied to 2 specific otters. When they got the permit, they had to provide the otters' ages as well as pictures of those otters. So the permit wasn't just for 2 otters in general, it was for 2 specific otter individuals. So if one of the otters they got a permit for died, they couldn't just immediately replace it with any old otter. They would have to then get a new permit for a specific individual otter. But SeaQuest brought in Hazelnut anyway without getting a permit specifically for her. And in the first week she was there, the other otter got her pregnant. And breeding wasn't permitted at all either. But that didn't stop SeaQuest from announcing the birth of 4 baby otters in January 2018. They issued a press release that said the baby otters weren't ready to be handled yet, but staff members would be carrying them around the aquarium for 10 to 15 minutes every hour, and during that time you could get selfies with them. They also said you could get an interaction with them in the spring for $19.95, and they were also going to be doing a naming contest. Animal Control caught wind of what SeaQuest was doing and quickly put an end to it. Since they didn't have a permit for Hazelnut or any of the babies, they couldn't be put on display in any way, shape or form. Animal Control fined them $2,000 and said that Hazelnut and the babies would have to be moved elsewhere on April 30th, which would give the babies enough time to bond and learn from their parents. So SeaQuest covered up the otter cage because they weren't allowed to be displayed. They also had their exotic animal permit suspended.
County authorities followed up and in April revoked SeaQuest's exotic animal permit for possessing unpermitted otters and coatimundi, noting the original permitted animals are no longer at the location.
They did try and get their permit back, but were denied for a few reasons. Firstly, Hazelnut had no right to be at SeaQuest to begin with, to be in the position to get pregnant. Secondly, she was 2 at the time of her arrival, so potential pregnancy concerns should have been raised then. And thirdly, SeaQuest may claim to diligently care for their animals, but they actually did not know that Hazelnut was pregnant until a week before she gave birth. When the time came, SeaQuest moved Hazelnut, the father of the babies, and then 2 babies to a separate location. They left 2 of the babies behind at the Las Vegas location. Animal Control ended up issuing them with a new permit with tighter restrictions, which allowed them to keep those 2 baby otters still there. In December 2022, a door fell on one of those otters' feet. He sustained a dislocation to one toe, a fracture to another toe, and a laceration on his foot pad. And Vince's response to the illegal otter breeding was that since they are a vulnerable species, the more otters, the better.
I bought an Asian small-clawed otter. Now keep in mind, this is a vulnerable species. If we had more Asian small-clawed otters in the world, we'd be better off because they're vulnerable.
And that is the sort of justification the owners of roadside zoos on Tiger King used to continue to breed endangered tigers to use the cubs in petting shows.
They should be donating their money to places like mine where we breed them. Number one, they're an endangered species. Duh. What's the first thing you should do to protect an endangered species? make more.
And this is not the first time Vince has caged animals up like this. He and his family have a history of being in the aquarium business and not doing it correctly. In December 2011, Vince's brother Ammon opened up the Idaho Aquarium, and then a year later, in December 2012, Vince and Ammon set up another aquarium in Portland. Almost immediately, the Portland Aquarium had a rocky start. In the first 3 months of opening, 200 animals died, and a former employee leaked the death logs. Bamboo sharks, seahorses, stingrays, garden eels, and many species of fish died from infections, starvation, a power outage, attacks from incompatible tank mates, getting caught in drain screens, being hit by falling rocks, escaping from their tanks, and unknown causes. The veterinarian the aquarium was using actually left over animal welfare concerns. He said, "I feel those animals were subjected to undue pain and suffering to save money." He also said he repeatedly recommended quarantine procedures, which were never put in place. While Vince was dealing with all of that, Ammon found himself in hotter water than the water that an octopus boiled to death in at SeaQuest.
Originally there was a larger octopus, and something happened overnight where the temperature switched and it literally cooked alive and burned to death.
Ammon was wanting to get some more unique species for his aquarium in Idaho. He specifically wanted spotted eagle rays. A seller who ended up working as an informant quoted him the price of $1,250 per ray. The seller was going to catch them in the wild, but because they are listed as near threatened, the only way that you can take them from the wild is by getting a special permit. The seller was going to get that permit, but it was going to take some time to be approved. A few weeks later, the seller told Ammon that he wasn't able to get the permits. The court documents state that Ammon suggested that the seller sneak the rays to him. Ammon also said, "Just start doing it. Who gives a shit, man?" Credit card records show that on May 7th, 2012, Ammon transferred $3,750 to this supposed seller. About a month later, Ammon's business partner, Christopher Conk, contacted the seller saying that they were interested in getting some lemon sharks. Those were another near-threatened species that required permits to be able to take them out of the wild. But of course, they planned on doing it without permits. Court documents showed that Christopher said that the transaction would have to be kept on the down low. Then they were both arrested in February 2013. They were both charged with conspiracy and wildlife trafficking. On the evening of their arrest, Ammon was released on a $100,000 bond. That night, Ammon instructed his 20-year-old nephew, Pete Covino, to contact the seller, not realizing it was the seller who actually turned them in. Over the phone, Pete instructed the seller to cancel the order and refund their money. He also told the seller to erase all of the text messages and emails that Ammon sent him, and that also landed Pete in hot water. Because of that, Pete spent 2 months in prison for trying to destroy and conceal evidence in a legal case. Ammon received a year in jail for his offenses, and Christopher, who was more cooperative with investigators, only spent 4 months in jail. And while all that was going down, Vince got to work on opening more aquariums. He opened the Austin Aquarium in 2013, and then the San Antonio Aquarium in 2014.
In Austin, Texas, owner Vince Covino tells our news partners at KXAN an aquarium there will open this winter. But there is already an open investigation with the city's code compliance department. The city of Austin says the Austin Aquarium hasn't obtained a building permit, and a complaint shows that they have been cited for not having a certificate of occupancy and for installing water tanks without an approved site plan.
It seems to be the way they operate.
Ammon was involved in helping to establish these aquariums in some way, shape, or form before and after he returned from prison. But a condition of Ammon's probation was that he wasn't allowed to be involved in any sort of exhibition, purchase or sale of any fish or wildlife for 2 years after his prison sentence.
This centrally located wall of records, just one thing the aquarium has done in recent weeks.
It shows you your temperature, your salinity, your pH.
They're fighting for their reputation.
And it's a long, drawn-out process.
After co-founder Amin Covino was given prison time for trying to illegally buy protected animals.
Honestly, Amin hasn't had anything to do with our animal care, how we procure our animals, how our animal procedures are taken care of.
They say Covino was only involved in the building's construction, and his sentence won't affect them at all.
Since Amin was more heavily involved in helping to establish the Austin Aquarium before he went to prison, his name was on a lot of paperwork. And because of that, the USDA would not issue Vince with any sort of license to operate the aquarium. So it wasn't until Vince went through and removed Amin's name from all of the documents that he was finally issued with a USDA license. Even though Amin still completely planned on being a part of the Austin Aquarium, because in February 2016, he was found to be violating his probation. He was caught engaging in activities at the Portland, the San Antonio, and the Austin Aquarium. He was then sentenced to an additional 6 months in prison and fined $50,000. The Portland Aquarium, that was never really able to escape the controversy that it encountered at the start, ended up closing down in 2016. And then the ownership of the Austin Aquarium and the San Antonio Aquarium was transferred into Christi Covino's name, who was Amin's wife. And then in 2016, Vince opened up SeaQuest. But in November 2016, authorities issued another warrant for Amin's arrest because he was caught helping to open the first 2 SeaQuest locations in Utah and Nevada. Amin was then put in prison for another 8 months. So yeah, I think it's very clear that a number of these family members have no respect for the laws or rules or animal welfare. So Amin did end up making it through 2 years of probation without another offense, and now he operates the Austin and San Antonio Aquarium. He is allowed to work with animals again, but the USDA will never issue him with a license to own and operate an aquarium. But really, he should be banned from ever going near another aquarium again. In an undercover PETA investigation, he was the one who gave the order to release a bunch of lizards inside and outside the Austin Aquarium.
We used to just let them out.
Why?
Because Amin thought we had too many.
Yeah, we released like 600.
So we just let them go.
He even stopped requiring guests to sign waivers before going into animal encounters because it was too time consuming. And after a child with a cochlear implant got bitten, he wanted to stop people with disabilities from entering the interactive experiences.
What exactly did Amin He knows. He saw her and talked to her. I do.
No more retarded kids in lemurs for fun.
This morning I found her with...
That's the exact opposite.
Also, a number of other people have been attacked or bitten by the lemurs at the Austin Aquarium.
Multiple people reported being attacked by lemurs and other animals at the Austin Aquarium.
What's the worst one? Because not bad. His ringtails.
A kid, yeah. He's getting one for kids' faces because they're more eye level with him, I think.
And it's not just the people getting hurt, it's also the lemurs getting injured as well. One has a disfigured hind leg and it just paces back and forth. 2 otters also are displaying severe psychological distress, and according to USDA reports, that started when they were forced into more encounters with the public. A lot of animals that they get don't even come to them healthy to begin with because they get a lot of them from SeaQuest.
We get a lot of our animals from Amin's brother's aquarium business. If somebody asks, we say USDA regulated breeders, but we get a good chunk of them from Amin's brother's business. And they don't come to us in very good health. A lot of the time, we have to kind of backtrack and fix mistakes that have been made along the way. We had a capybara come in and she looked awful. Her teeth were like broken on her. She was very skinny.
Not only that, but the capybara was kept by itself. In the wild, they usually live in large social groups near large masses of water, and sometimes have a symbiotic relationship with a number of other species. But at the Austin Aquarium, and all of the other aquariums that this family owns, including all of the SeaQuest locations, these animals are deprived of any sort of semblance to their wild life. They don't get any natural sunlight or fresh air. I know I only focused on a handful of animals in this video, but there are countless other instances of animals being injured, or staff and guests being injured, or something illegal going on at any aquarium that the Cavono family owns. And instead of trying to fix all of that, Vince has instead attempted to launch a reality TV show.
Because we had rehired, we had retrained. Somebody keeps blowing up my phone.
Let's put your phone on silent.
All right, hold on. We're opening Folsom tomorrow. After 7 long months of being closed because of COVID, we finally got the call we can reopen Folsom tomorrow. We're opening Folsom tomorrow.
I have to laugh. I'm sorry. This is so ridiculous.
You know what isn't a reality though? Vince's conservation and education claims. On the SeaQuest website, it says their aim is to educate and conserve threatened or endangered species of wildlife. The supposed educational and conservational elements of SeaQuest are something that Vince tries to use to justify what they're doing at SeaQuest.
And if you want your children to learn about the environment and have a true love for the animals, have them come have a relationship where they're able to feed them and hold them and interact with them. And they're going to have a bond, and it's going to change the way that they treat the environment.
But a teacher in Las Vegas seriously questions whether what is being done at SeaQuest provides any sort of educational value.
This isn't a place to promote anything. I've told anybody with children this is wrong.
Third grade teacher Christine Lawrence agrees.
You have to dig deeper, and you have to look to see what you're supporting.
She successfully got her school to stop handing out SeaQuest coupons and thinks the entire district should follow suit. She questions the educational value of the SeaQuest environment for kids.
So they're learning zero. They're learning nothing from that.
And as for the animals,
they're not going to have natural behaviors. They're stressed. They're being prodded and poked by people.
These animals are dangerous. And they're not meant to be pulled out every hour so you can touch them. I guarantee you there's other ways to educate your kids.
And if SeaQuest truly was an educational experience, then there wouldn't be so many instances of guests feeding and handling the animals incorrectly. There have also been a number of instances at the New Jersey location where guests feed the animals the wrong thing. As per text messages between staff members, there was a man who would frequent the aquarium and attempt to feed the animals bread. One woman brought some lettuce from home to feed the animals, and someone put rabbit food through the otter feeding hole. So how exactly is this place educating people when they can't even show the animals some basic respect by making sure that they get the right food? And if they don't respect the animals, how are they even going to care about trying to conserve them? SeaQuest makes it seem as though they play a big role in conservation. It's all over their website, and one of their key initiatives is to try and restore the population of threatened species through breeding programs. The only animal they have that is going extinct in the wild that they are also allowed to breed is the axolotl.
Oh, they're biting each other. Probably have a few too many in there. Yeah, there's a lot of them in there.
They have 400 critically endangered axolotls. I know an axolotl technically isn't a fish, but what I'm about to say applies to fish, amphibians, and pretty much any animal kept in captivity. So the conservation value of an endangered or extinct fish in captivity has been largely questioned among ecologists and people involved in the captive fish world. Ecologist Olav Weil said that if a fish can't be reintroduced into the wild, then what is its conservation value? He also raises some concerns about people possibly becoming complacent about preserving native habitats because they may think it's okay because there are thousands of them in tanks in Europe. Chris Shepard, Traffic International's regional director of Southeast Asia, said that a captive fish is the same as a dead fish from a conservational point of view. Those professionals have that opinion because reintroducing a species back into the wild isn't as easy as plucking it from somebody's cage or fish tank at their house or from SeaQuest and just putting it back in the wild. Reintroducing a species isn't impossible by any means, but it is so rarely attempted because it takes so much time and a very dedicated team to do so. The one and only time an extinct fish in a fish tank had some sort of conservation value was with the tequila splitfin. They went extinct in the wild, and ever since 1998, the Chester Zoo in the UK have been keeping them alive in fish tanks. They are a zoo accredited by the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, so the fish that were kept at that zoo were in a very different circumstance than the fish that are kept at SeaQuest or in people's homes. While they were able to keep the fish alive in captivity, which seems to be something that SeaQuest can't do, they didn't have all too much of an input in the actual reintroduction of the species. In Mexico, where the fish is native to, a group of conservationists, researchers, and scientists were all working together to try and reintroduce the fish back into the wild. Chester Zoo sent the fish that they had to that team of people in Mexico. That team then built an artificial pond for the fish to breed in semi-captivity. They bred their population up to 10,000. Then in 2017, they released those fish into the wild, where their population increased by 55%. So yeah, it's a process that takes decades. Also for decades, a similar group of people in Mexico have been working together to try and introduce more axolotls into the wild. They've been working with locals who farm on chinapas, which are man-made floating islands. The water surrounding those islands are where the axolotls live, but a threat to the axolotls in the wild are the pesticides and chemicals that run off these crops and into the water. So this group of people have been developing sustainable farming methods that protect the crops, as well as encourage the growth of water plants and insects, which axolotls need to survive in the wild. They achieved suitable conditions in 2022 and released a bunch of axolotls into the water in a controlled environment. But Vince didn't have anything to do with helping to increase the axolotl population in Mexico. He hasn't helped those people or attempted anything individually, but he claims that he is helping with breeding programs, but those breeding programs don't have any sort of affiliation with what is going on in Mexico. He is simply using the axolotls to claim that SeaQuest is doing something for conservation, when it is doing nothing of the sort. With SeaQuest, the most important thing they can do is show care to each individual axolotl, not the species as a whole, since they can't do anything to save the species. They aren't saving the species despite what their website might say, and they aren't even helping to save the species. So instead of overcrowding their tanks and letting them breed with the claim of conservation, they should just have a handful of axolotls living comfortably. Are they going to do that with their axolotls or any overcrowded tank or cage they have there? Absolutely not. The other animals they have at SeaQuest that they aren't allowed to breed but they are at risk in the wild are the sloths and the otters. SeaQuest actually asked Animal Control in Las Vegas to amend their permit to allow them to breed the sloths, but Animal Control denied their request.
SeaQuest asked the county to amend its permit to allow breeding, but Animal Control denied the request until SeaQuest becomes AZA accredited. The Association of Zoos and Aquariums accredits facilities that meet high animal welfare standards, but AZA told me even if SeaQuest applies, it would not be accredited because it falls below AZA standards.
So the same axolotl conservation principle also applies to the otters and the sloths. they just have no conservation value. In fact, SeaQuest is actually doing more harm than good to sloths in the wild by allowing people to have these interactive experiences with them. There is a sloth selfie trend which SeaQuest breathes life into by promoting sloth selfies, and huge numbers of sloths are poached in the wild so that tourists can have these sloth selfies. So by continuing this sloth selfie trend, people are going to continue to want selfies with sloths at either a SeaQuest location or with one that has been poached from the wild. Sloths are considered to be the most illegally traded animal in Colombia. An investigation was done by ABC, which looked into the illegal sloth trade in Colombia, where people took sloths from the wild to sell them to tourists and for tourists to take photos with them.
Animal trafficking is now the third most lucrative criminal enterprise after drugs and guns. We found these men selling sloths openly on the side of the road to any passerby. Suddenly, a car pulls up next to us and the traffickers scatter.
Somebody just honked their horn and now these guys are running away.
They return when they realize it's just a passerby looking for a photo op.
These guys got scared as soon as they saw anyone approach because they know what they're doing is illegal.
The sloths that are bred in the United States are usually kept in pretty terrible conditions. Peter got footage of a sloth breeding facility, which was not a very nice place. And it's places like that where Vince purchases his exotic animals from. I had a quick look online for sloth and otters for sale, and most of the listings for these animals advertise them as good species ambassadors and good for petting zoos. So SeaQuest and places like it are the direct reason why sloths are being put at risk in the wild and why they keep getting bred in captivity. And when they get bred in captivity, they get purchased by companies like SeaQuest who don't know how to look after them, so they just keep dropping dead. SeaQuest does nothing to genuinely educate and conserve their vulnerable species, and they need to be stopped. In the description, I will link a bunch of petitions that you can sign if you wish, and I will also put a link to a TikTok account in the description. It is run by former staff members who are continuing to expose the cruelty that goes on at SeaQuest. Signing these petitions and getting involved on social media is important, and it is working. 2 SeaQuest locations have already shut down this year, one in Georgia and one in Connecticut, so we need to keep this momentum going. It was also recently discovered that animals were left behind at the Connecticut location. Apparently there was difficulties finding transportation for those animals. That is why it is so important for people who care about animals to stay involved and make sure these animals finally get free from SeaQuest. And it's going to be up to us to make this change happen, because something tells me those in charge don't really care that much.
I hate to disappoint some folks, but
This is Woodbridge Mayor John McCormick.
a fantastic opportunity to enhance our local retail.
Adding, the ordinance will be tailored to benefit your establishment.
Do you typically rewrite zoning language to benefit businesses?
SeaQuest on 3. 1, 2.
It looks like an opportunity to create family-friendly events year-round.
SeaQuest is going to increase the sales in the mall by 30% within the first year.
I have no comment at this time.
3,